taken through a study of key themes in the book Black Prep, Life Lessons of a Perpetual Outsider, where they will identify the manifestation of the Black Prep pillars of success, the pillars in those themes, and will also learn to apply the pillars so that they will have the tools to thrive in the environment moving forward, in any environment. So our instructor today is Kimberly Baker. She is a graduate of Stanford University and a former teacher with the LA Unified District. After graduating from law school, she served as a public interest attorney where she represented youth with disabilities and youth in the juvenile justice and foster care systems. She served as a deputy attorney general for the California Department of Justice, where she practiced consumer protection and criminal law under former Attorney General Jerry Brown and later former Attorney General Kamala Harris. In 2015, Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti appointed her to launch the city's first ever Office of Reentry, where she developed policies and programs that created employment, housing, legal advocacy, and family reunification opportunities for thousands of Angelenos who were formerly incarcerated. In her spare time, she loves to write and offer encouragement as a motivational speaker. Visit her website and we will put that in our group chat as well. And then I'll go over some housekeeping rules before we begin. So to allow Ms. Kimberly to present her presentation, please mute your mics. If you have any questions, please leave them in the Zoom chat. Otherwise, wait till the end or have one of your reactions bar will have a raised hand setting, so you can raise your hand and Kimberly will call on you so you can ask your question. But otherwise, Kimberly, please take it away. And thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Kathleen. And thank you to everyone for joining today. This is such an honor. I have to thank Delna for the formal invitation to participate. I've been so excited about this presentation, and also Anissa for her support and information along the way, and also to the Schneider family, because I think they were the conduit between Ollie and me in terms of the initial contact. So thank you all. And thank you to everyone for joining. This is such an honor to be able to speak with you about this issue that's very near and dear to my heart. So what I'd like to do, since this is a very intimate group, is just take a moment to tell you a little bit about me and why I even decided to write this book. And then I'd love to hear who we have on the call today so I can get to know you as well. And then we're going to do some exercises where I'm going to read some excerpts from the book and talk about how we can apply the Black Prep pillars of success as we navigate unwelcoming or challenging spaces. So first, I'll just say I designed this workshop because I wanted to support young people as well as their loved ones who are supporting them in elite or unconventionally supportive territory. And that can be academic space, like high school, private high school, or it can be college, it can be corporate America. We have all had experiences where we've been considered the outsider. And so I have felt like an outsider for the majority of my life in different spaces. And what I learned how to do was to look at my differences as assets and not liabilities. And so I wanted to share how I was able to get to that space. And so what I've come to understand is mindset matters. It really doesn't matter what other people think about you as much as it matters what you think about yourself. And so I was a brown-skinned Black girl from South Los Angeles back in 1990 at 12 years old. And I went to my local public school, lived with my family. We grew up off of Crenshaw in Washington, for those of you who are familiar with Los Angeles. And at 12 years old, I was thrust into this environment with people who didn't look like me, didn't have my same socioeconomic background, had very different familial structures than I did. And I was getting messaging that was negative, that I wasn't smart enough to be there. I wasn't pretty enough. I wasn't thin enough. I wasn't connected enough. And then in some circles, I'm getting messaging, I'm not Black enough. And so I'm constantly feeling like, where do I belong? I'm an outsider in this world. I'm an outsider to this world. And so over time and during my journey, I figured out that this is going to have to be about how I see myself. And the initial transition to that particular environment was really jarring. I felt like people had preconceived notions about me. They felt like I wouldn't be able to achieve, and that I was just there on some affirmative action opportunity. And so I felt the weight of that on me. But there was no roadmap available to me in terms of how to navigate. And my family hadn't been in those environments previously, so they could give me their love, but they didn't necessarily know how to help me get through it. And so essentially, I had to develop armor. And that is really what the book Black Prep is about. It's about me navigating these spaces and pulling from my experiences the key pillars that help me get through. And I think these are pillars that help me to this day. And so what I want to talk about today is how you can access those pillars and help others that you love who are maybe in spaces that are unconventional or unfamiliar to thrive in using those pillars. And so before we dive into reading some excerpts from the book and talking about the 4 pillars of success, I would just love to just quickly go around and get to know everyone who's here. We have an intimate group. So if you wouldn't mind, I'm just going to ask if you could just share your name and your affiliation with the school and why you decided to, or with the program and why you decided to join us today. So that'll help me frame and kind of focus us in how we talk today. So I don't know if everyone has the same setup that I have as far as where everyone is situated. So what I'll do is I'll just call on folks based on their screen name, if that's okay. So with that, I'm going to go to my immediate right. And I don't know if Ms. Barton Thompson was planning to speak, but if she is, I'd love to invite her to introduce herself. Oh, you're on mute.
My name is Denise Barton Thompson. I'm a social media specialist. I actually wasn't going to participate. I was going to go behind the wall. But this is, no, that's okay. It's actually a very interesting topic to me because I was one of 22 graduating African-American seniors in a high school graduating class of 450. So I think I have a very similar lived experience as what you're going to be talking about today. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. And I apologize for putting you on the spot.
That's okay.
Okay, so next going clockwise would be Ms. Delna Diet Means.
I'm used to that. It's Delina Joe Means. And I have been with Ollie for like the past 7 years. I taught mostly in the Los Angeles Unified School District through the 28 years that I taught. And some contrast to that was when I taught in Maryland, Rockville, contrast in terms of the demographics, because I went from a Black environment to a white environment. And I just noticed that the small percentage of Black kids in the Maryland school system were going to have a hard time. It was just a striking contrast. The behavior was different. Everything was different. And I also taught in Senegal, West Africa for 2 years, and total contrast. But I taught in the inner city schools in Los Angeles. So I understand where you're coming from. And plus my kids went to schools where they were probably in the small percentage of Black students. And they had the same, especially my daughter had this, one of my daughters, she said she didn't know if she was Black or white because she was shunned by both groups.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Delina, I went to the schools that you were just referring to. I grew up in the same area you were talking about.
Okay.
My name is Donald Means. I'm Delina's husband. I've been in Ollie for about 10 years. I I teach tennis for seniors in Ollie. I grew up in South Central LA, school 90 Fremont High School, which was probably 90% Black when I was there. And I'm just interested in learning new things. And this sounds like a really interesting topic.
Mhm.
Thank you. Thank you to both of you for joining. We're going to move on to the next person. Clockwise which would be Princella Polk for me. Ms. Polk?
Is she muted?
She may be away from.
That's okay. Okay, we'll just keep going. Next for me would be Denise McLeod. Ms. McLeod?
Hi, I'm sorry, I was trying to unmute. My name is Denise McLeod. I was interested in the topic that you're speaking about today, both because I've been in those situations. I have actually been in both situations. I went to predominantly Black schools from K through 12, and then went to predominantly white university where I was one of few. And so consequently felt a lot of those same things. But my daughter went from kindergarten through college, actually, as being one of very few in her class. In fact, while she was in junior high and high school, she was the only Black girl in her class. There were a few Black boys, but she was the only Black girl. I've also had the opportunity to serve on the board for several years of my daughter's school, which is one of the elite private schools, if you will, in Southern California, in LA. And so had an opportunity to, kind of think about this and talk about it. And I served on the board of College Bound as well, which was an organization that was formed to help Black kids to prepare for and get into colleges. So just an interesting topic for me, and glad to be able to hear you speak about it today.
Thank you. And I have to say, I'm familiar with College Bound. My husband went through College Bound a long time ago. And I think Damien, the Schneider's son, and my friend from college worked for College Bound. So think very highly of that organization. So thank you very much.
Damien is my nephew. His parents are also on this call. And I understand that you also went to Stanford. I went to Stanford as an undergrad.
Oh, really? The world is so small.
It is a small world.
Oh, thank you so much for being
Thank
here.
you.
All right. So next is Eula Slater.
Unmute.
Muted. They have to mute me because I talk over everybody. Okay, I've been an Ollie member for like 14 years. I looked back the other day and I said, gee whiz, I've been here a long time. I thought the topic was interesting. I come from Illinois. I come from the town where Northwestern University is. And there were not a whole bunch of us there. And there were only 11% of us in a great big old high school. So, but I never felt, the pressure from that. Other than that, I'm very uninteresting, and I'm interested to hear your topic.
Thank you. Thank you. And I doubt you're uninteresting. From your introduction, I doubt you're uninteresting. Thank you, Ms. Slater. Okay, next up would be Anthonette Drone. Anthonette Drone.
I do believe she's at work.
Okay. Oh, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. Ms. Susan Washington.
Good afternoon, everyone. I attended Fremont High School in the 60s, so I really didn't experience any type of prejudice until I attended San Jose State. And I was there when John Carlos was there. So you know what happened at that time. So I just thought this was a very interesting class, and I just wanted to take it and get more information, especially to be attuned, because I have a grandson coming up in the corporate world. So I wanted to be attuned for him.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Next would be Ms. Paulette Bradley.
Good afternoon, everyone. I've a short-termer with OLLI, only about 4 years that I've been associated, and it's really been a very lovely and comforting experience. I had a neighbor and friend introduce me to the organization shortly after the loss of my husband. And so it was a very timely association for me. I was raised in San Diego, and I had very loving and supporting parents who raised me in much of a bubble. So my dad never explained to me that I was Black and that there was a ceiling or any of those things. I went to a very small school, which was Regina Caeli. So that tells you it was a Catholic school. And it was mostly Latino. And thinking back, they were just about the same color as me. So the only difference is the language. Of course, the nuns wouldn't allow them to speak Spanish on campus. They had to speak English. So my first brutal introduction to all these differences was when I got an assignment at Disneyland, the pseudo happiest place in the world. It was not for me. I had some very emotional encounters with white people who wanted to know how I got the job, look down when you speak to me, all kinds of remarks that I had absolutely no retort. I mean, I didn't know how to handle it. And no one ever spoke to me or treated me like that. And so my parents came up, to witness the job that I was assigned there. The manager's husband used to bird dog me. He would watch because he had to call security a couple of times. So that was a very, I forgot to mention, I was the third person in 67. So I was odd man out in the uniform there at the AT&T exhibit. It was America the Beautiful. So from there, I went on to work for a major airline for 35 years. So that was another level in travel and corporate America. So it's been a learning journey, but like you, and I appreciate your comments about not paying attention to what people think or perceive of what they think, and let them be surprised, because I was lucky enough to be chosen for a number of very public assignments. And the surprise on people's faces when I walked in the door was just precious. They couldn't tell over the phone who I was or what I was. And I was really kind of taken, what difference did it make? So anyway, it's been a very enlightening experience. I've really had a lot of opportunities, public. I do a lot in the city. I've been on commissions, for years. So it's all good.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate you sharing. Thank you so much, Ms. Bradley. Okay, just two more people and we're going to dive into the workshop. And so I'm going to go into the center of my screen, which would be Mr. and Mrs. Schneider.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We're really so glad to be here to join in with Kimberly today. It's been growing up, because again, we went to Fremont, so in the 60s, so it was almost, entirely Black, and then transitioning to UCLA. I think it was easier in some ways because at that time there were a lot more Black students in attendance, and there were a lot of activities going on, but still at the same time, we had to watch, what was going on and how to, learn how to navigate the school. But I guess my biggest issue came when I actually went to work, because when I first started teaching, I had to go out to the valley in Van Nuys, and I was like, there were 3 Black teachers there, and I used to watch the Black students bust in from Bret Harte junior high at that time. And it was very upsetting. Not so much that they were being bussed in, but what happened to them after they got to the school. And it was really hard for a lot of the kids. And so I really appreciate what you're doing, because I'm really thinking at that time, if those students, and again, because their parents probably didn't know because it was mandatory busing, you really didn't have too much choice. But for the kids to be more successful, to try to understand what they needed to do to navigate that situation successfully. And so, and then with our own children, again, we had to do the same thing. And again, like we said, Damien was at Poly, but again, it was a kind of a weird situation because of the program he was in. And so it's like he had to navigate between 2 worlds, because the program only had about 7 Blacks, but the school was majority minority, but he didn't get to, interface with a lot of those kids every day. So he had to deal with, where do I fit in? And, we had to, help him to feel comfortable regardless, and be comfortable in his skin and who he was. So thank you very much for doing this. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Godfrey. I guess I have a lot of Fremont family on this. There's like 5 of us who went to Fremont on this. 3 of us went to Stanford. I also went to Stanford. I was there in my freshman year. And coming out of high school, like you said, we had 808 people in our graduating class, and maybe 775 were Black. And so going to Stanford after that, where you could count the Black people in your dorm, probably on one hand. But it was quite a bit of, differences, keeping your self assurance and also your self confidence up in a situation like that, because you hear the stories that your class is an A- average coming out of high school, and how can you do now that you're dealing with that? And my biggest thing was I love math, and I use that as my confidence builder, and that I figured I could stick with anybody in math, which I did, and so that helped me out. I mean, other courses brought me down, but the math kept me up. But after graduation, went to UCLA and went to UCLA again for grad school. And after graduation, I went to a business or company here in LA where I was the only Black person, I think, in my department. And then after a few years, I switched to another department where I was the only Black person in that department. And then we'll get training. We'll go across country, different training classes, and I ended up being the only Black person mostly in those training classes. So it was quite a bit of a change. Not so much from college, but just from my growing up in South Central, and you had to deal with that also. And a lot of times you would try to find people who were in those training classes that you could relate to, and see how you get together and go through those classes together. So it was that way.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I appreciate both of you being here. So last but not least, I'm going to ask Miss, and I apologize if I mispronounce your name, Miss Pabigo.
Pabigo.
Okay, Pabigo.
You were close.
Okay.
I'm a cousin to Damien and his parents and Denise. And like them, I grew up in South Central LA, and progressively I ended up in some elite spaces. I went to an all-Black Catholic elementary school, Then I went on to St. Mary's Academy for high school, and I believe there were 40 of us that were Black in a school of like 600 girls. Then I went to Loyola Marymount, and I was one of 2 Black students to finish in accounting. The rest of my major all dropped. And it wasn't because they didn't have the brain power to complete the degree. It was because most of the students in accounting, their parents, one of their parents at least, was a CPA. So they had help in a very difficult program.
Absolutely.
And me and the other guy, we had to figure it out ourselves. So it would take me like 8 hours to do a homework assignment, whereas a white friend from St. Mary's told me that the others, they had their dads would rotate doing the homework for them, and then they would share it, and then they would back in to whatever the problem was, whereas I was trying to go forward because I had no answer. But I finished, and I had 3 interviews with the Big 8 CPA firm. It was a Big 8 then, now I think it's Big 3. And I got turned down, and I asked my professor who recommended me why. And she said, you had the grades, you had the experiences, you had everything except for one thing. They were looking for a tall, blonde, attractive woman to smooth clients and get business for them. And I said, okay, I'll never be tall because I'm 5 foot. I'll never be blonde because I don't want to be. And I'm not going to suck up to a man to get business because I don't do that. So I said, I'm better off doing something else. So then I went work for the federal government. And it turned out I was the only woman, the only person under 50, and the only Black person in the whole agency of the National Credit Union Administration. I did that for 12 years, being the only everything. And the guys were really nice to me, but it was a job that required a lot of travel. So when we traveled, they'd be roommates and make money off their per diem. And I always had to have my own spot. And then they had to be very careful what they said in front of me, the drinks. A couple of them tried to pick me up on business trips. It was an experience, but it prepared me where I could work anywhere. And so then after I had my kids, I went work for LA Unified School District. And I ended up being the principal in one of the few all Black schools, elementary schools in the district in Inglewood. It's the only LA school in Inglewood. So I thrived in an environment. I love that school. I was there for 12 years and had fun every single day at work because it was our place, and we understood each other. And that was my goal in the first place, to work with our children where they were like the kings and queens of our world.
Absolutely.
And build confidence and appreciate them.
Thank you. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I would love for us to be able to talk longer about everyone's experience, but we are almost halfway through the session. So I do want to jump right in to some of the readings that I had in mind. But thank you all for being so forthcoming with your background and for sharing with me, because that helps me. And it sounds like all of you are yourselves Black prep. So you will resonate. I think a lot of what I'm going to share is going to resonate with you. So the thing I want to do right now is I'm going to share with you the 4 Black prep pillars of success. And then I'm going to read some excerpts. And I would love for everyone to participate. You can, and let me know what pillars you identify in these excerpts I'm going to read. And I tried to pick some excerpts that I thought would resonate with everyone. So the first thing I want to note, and I think I heard this in everything that everyone shared, was that there are different pillars or different skills that we can draw upon to get us through these types of situations. And I heard some of the pillars in what you all shared about your experiences. And so when I finished going through my life, and up in the book only goes up until I'm starting college, but I realized that there were some consistent themes in what got me through, and not just allowed me to limp across the finish line at my high school, but to be successful and to thrive at my high school. So essentially, I call them the 4 Black prep pillars of success. And the first one is embrace your unique strengths. And so essentially, we're different, and I've always been different. I have always felt like I stuck out. I stuck out when I was in my neighborhood growing up, and then once I got to the elite spaces, I was sticking out there. I was never really fully feeling like I was accepted into either world. And I know I heard folks talk to that and speak to that. So one thing I was able to determine through this process was that we're all different, and our differences are not liabilities. The world might have us think that, but that is not true. And so it's what about us that is unique, that actually makes us an asset. And those are actually our strengths. So that was the first Black prep pillar of success: embrace your unique strengths. The second one is foster resilience. So there are going to be things, and all of you who are parents know this, there are going to be tough times. We cannot insulate our children from every negative experience in life. In fact, if we're trying to do that, we're not serving them well. And so things are going to happen that are horrible, and they're going to be sad, and they're going to rattle us to our core. And what I learned through my lessons and my experience is that you're going to face rejection. You're going to face negativity. Sometimes you're going to fall short of your goals, but what really matters is how you respond to that. Do you just give up and tap out? Or do you say, you know what, I fell short and I'm going to try this again? And so that resilience piece was really key to my success at my school. The third one is hold fast to your village. I think one thing people think when they go into these elite spaces, or they send their children into elite spaces, is, okay, we got our child into this elite program. They know what to do, hands off. And I think that is one of the most detrimental things people of color can do for their children, because these schools are good at what they do, which is creating elite spaces where people can thrive and be competitive and go on to the next level. But they are not a proxy for your child's parents or their family or their village. And I think one of the things that really separates people who do really well in these environments from people who really struggle is that their families are front and center. Their villages are right there. And they say, you know what? Yes, you're at this school, and yes, we want you to do well, but do not forget who you are, and understand that we are here to support you when advocacy is needed, and it will be. And so holding fast to your village was really important. And I think a lot of children, when they kind of go through those teenage years, they have this natural separation that they try with their parents. But I think parents have to understand how to support their children in a way that helps them know that we are always here. Even if you are going to go your way and try to navigate this terrain individually, understand we're always here, and your children will feel comfortable drawing upon that when that time comes. And I certainly did with my family. And then the fourth pillar, and then we'll dive into the readings, is be honest with yourself. You know, I think sometimes when we have our students in certain situations and they feel as if they've been targeted or been discriminated against, certainly there's an instinct to fight and to say, you know, we're not gonna stand for this. And I think that's appropriate. But I think one thing that's very important for the students and the families is to be honest and to make sure that we always have internal accountability. And what I mean by that is sometimes, yes, things happen and they need to be called out in that moment or handled immediately. But I also think that we have to be honest with ourselves about where we are human, and that's none of us are infallible. And so sometimes things happen that are tough. And I think one of the things that is really hard on students is when they feel like they have to be perfect, and they feel like their families expect them to be perfect. And you're the one that we're supporting, and you're going to be the first one to accomplish these goals, and our whole village is behind you, so you can't mess up. And I'm sure at some point we've all felt that on our shoulders. but we have to make sure to help our students understand you do not have to be perfect. And when you do make mistakes, which you will because you're human, we will be here to support you, but we need you to be honest with yourself about where you could have done better. And that way we can support you with all of the information we need to go forward in helping you and advocating for you. So those essentially are the 4 pillars, and I wanted to tell them or speak about them at the beginning before the readings, because I wanted you to keep them in mind as I read. And so once I'm done with the excerpts, I'm going to read one and then we'll take a pause and then we'll go to the next. I would love for your insights and your thoughts about which pillars you felt or saw or heard in the experiences I'm going to share. So with that, I'm going to start with my first reading, and I'm reading from my book. I'm not good at, let me see, I got to block my face. I don't know if you can't see it. Oh, there we go. Black Prep, Life Lessons of a Perpetual Outsider. And so this is the book that I've recently written, and I'm going to read some excerpts from it. The first excerpt I'm reading is from chapter 11, and the title of the chapter is The Road to Ascension is Lined with Affliction. And this is essentially once I was getting into these private schools and I was starting to visit them to see which one I wanted to attend. So I'll start. I navigated the application process relatively well, and I felt confident that I would be accepted into the 4 schools to which I applied. As part of the admissions process, I was invited to a shadow day at one of the schools. My hostess, Emily, called me the night before I was to come to the school. During our conversation, I was bubbly and engaging and made certain not to give her any reason to suspect that I wasn't just like her. I didn't make any references to where I lived, my parents' marital status, our socioeconomic status, or any information to that extent in that regard. At the end of the conversation, she said in a cheery tone, "Let's meet up at the front gates tomorrow." "Totally," I said, employing my very best code switching techniques. Through the magic of television, I had been exposed to people of various cultures and backgrounds and had learned how to emulate the vocal intonations of what was commonly referred to during that era as a Valley Girl. I felt that my performance had been convincing. "See you in the morning," she said. "Bye." "Bye," I responded, and I hung up the phone. The next day, I arrived on campus wearing my favorite stone-wash flared jean skirt with 3 denim bows by the zipper and my royal blue sweater with pink and yellow umbrellas on it. This is the 90s, by the way. I wore 2 pairs of thick slouchy socks, 1 pink pair and 1 yellow. I positioned the pink sock on the bottom and the yellow sock on the top on my right leg, and the yellow sock on the bottom and the pink sock on the top on my left leg. I pulled my hair up into a high ponytail and wrapped 3 scrunchies around its base. They were pink, yellow, and blue. Decked out in my all-time favorite outfit, I felt quite confident. I am ready for this, I told myself. I saw 2 girls sitting on a bench at the school's front entrance. One of them looked up at me and then quickly looked away. I looked around and I didn't see anyone else waiting at the front entrance of the school, so I assumed Emily had to be one of the 2 girls seated before me. I walked up to them and said, "Hi, are either of you Emily?" The girl who had looked up previously said, "Yeah, I'm Emily." My smile widened. "Hi, Emily, I'm Kim." And I extended my hand. Her face fell. She sharply inhaled and said, "You're Black." I was taken aback. My hand dropped. The alliance had not prepared me for this. My heart rate quickened and I held my breath. Her friend shot Emily a dirty look and said, "Hi, I'm Anna. It's good to meet you. Let's show you around." I trailed behind Anna and Emily eventually caught up. As the day progressed and Anna showed me around the campus, I started to breathe again. Despite Emily's rudeness and not meeting anyone who looked like me that day, I could still picture myself at the school. I knew I deserved to be there and access the best education available. At the conclusion of the day, Anna and Emily delivered me back to the front gates of the school. When my mother picked me up after the shadow day, she asked how everything went. Fine, I lied. I didn't want her to worry. My mother wasn't 100% convinced of the whole independent school route just yet. She was concerned about finances and I didn't want to give her another reason to question it. On the ride home, as my mother started listening to her favorite Christian praise and worships tapes, I felt the gravity of Emily's comment sink in. I was Black. Up until that point, I had not considered being Black a detriment. I knew that my family had their share of struggles that they had to overcome because of discrimination and oppression, but I did not feel that my ethnicity in and of itself made me less desirable or worthy. However, regardless of what I felt about myself, the reality was that I was Black. And no matter which of the independent schools I chose to attend, the majority of my peers would not be. I was not rich. The majority of my peers would be. I was fat, and the majority of my peers would be thin. My hair was short and kinky, and the majority of my peers would have long, straight hair. I was different, an outsider in so many ways before I was even admitted. Was the independent school experience meant for someone like me? So I'll stop there. And I will ask if anyone, well, first, if there's just anything you'd like to share or that resonated. And then second, if there are any pillars that you heard, and thank you so much to Anissa for putting them in the chat. If there are any of the pillars that you heard highlighted in that particular excerpt. And you can, I unmute, oh yes, I see the Schneiders, yes.
I think I heard foster resilience, and that when you got there, you know, how Emily treated you, because you could have just said, you know, just melted and call your mother and say, I'm ready to go home. But it's like something internal within you. No, I can do this, and I should be able to do this.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. So yes, absolutely. I think, do I see, oh, yes, yes, Delina.
Yes, I'm only, I think that in a very tangential way, hold fast to your village, because if you were using the Valley Girl lingo and knowing that you had to do that, because I remember having to do that on a lot of calls when I wanted to get a job, then I still was holding fast to my village, but I knew I had to be careful if I were gonna, if I wanted to get the job, or if I wanted to be accepted over the phone. But I did have an experience where I feigned my accent. My mother used to do that all the time, and we used to criticize her, by the way. She would really talk white. Well, I got to the particular job thing. I was supposed to be tutoring, being a tutor in French. And a lot of other people were there. I was the only Black person. And the woman who had a German accent that was on the call, she said, you know, I knew you were Black, you know, before I got there. And I was like, oh, really? So I was like, how does she know? You know, because I thought I did a good job to fake her out. But it was interesting that she made that comment, and yet she still accepted me, because back in the day, during that same period, try to get a job, try to get an apartment, try to do something with, once they saw you, then all of a sudden, oh, I'm sorry, we've already filled that position, or the apartment's already been rented.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I think I see Denise's hand up.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say that I saw probably pieces of the other two pillars as well. I think that you certainly have shown that you embrace your strengths, and you knew that you could compete and had every confidence with regard to that. But I think there's also a point where we learn by and through experiences how to be honest with ourselves, and not to convince ourselves that we are going to be accepted, because I think sometimes we allow ourselves to be let down because people don't accept us, and so you have to be honest with yourself that, you know, that there could be some hesitancy to to have people treat you equally, you know. So
Absolutely.
I certainly can relate to that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to keep moving because we're running short of on time, but thank you to all three of those comments, which were so on point.
Okay, and we
Oh.
do have Paulette and Eula. Do you mind holding your questions for her next one? If that's okay.
And I apologize, I didn't see them. I apologize. So yes, they'll be first for the next one. Okay, so the next excerpt is in chapter 13. The chapter is called Don't Be Ashamed of Who You Are. And for context, this is after I had decided I was going to go to Marlboro School, and the summer before, my mom decided to send me to summer school to get acclimated. So far, the first few days of summer school have been going well. I was learning the cadence and routine of my new environment. On my first day, I wore a bright mango-colored silk blouse with culotte short set that my Aunt Deb had bought for me. I paired it with my favorite black patent leather flats with bows affixed near the top of my shoes. After wearing that outfit the first day, I soon came to realize that everyone else tended to wear jean shorts, V-neck shirts from the Gap, or ratty t-shirts with the name of a rock band emblazoned across the front, and Birkenstocks. By the second day, I was wearing jean shorts, a white V-neck shirt, and since I didn't own Birkenstocks, tennis shoes. I didn't see anyone around me wearing multicolored slouch socks either, so I ditched mine for a pair of white athletic socks. Within the first few days, I was introduced to the music of Roxette and Sinead O'Connor. During breaks from class, students preferred to talk about what country they planned to visit after summer school ended. They also passed countless hours complaining about their teachers, parents, or nannies. I was learning how to navigate and participate in the conversations that my classmates were having. I felt like I was gaining footing. That all changed a few days into summer school, when one morning, Papa, that was my grandfather, and I lived with him and my mom, Papa grabbed his keys to the Plymouth, not the Toyota, on our way out of the house. A feeling of dread engulfed me. As we exited the house, I feverishly tried to think of questions I could ask or something I could do to deter Papa from driving the Plymouth, but nothing came to mind. So I slowly trudged behind him to the car and got inside. And I should say here now, it was a 1962 Plymouth. I said it earlier, but not in this excerpt. As we drove down Crenshaw Boulevard and headed toward Wilshire, a feeling of panic began to set in as I realized we were getting closer and closer to campus. I couldn't chance being seen in this monstrosity as we waited in the long line of cars in queue to drop children off at the school's front gate. On the spot, I devised a plan to lay down in the back seat and reduce my chances of being seen. I slumped my head to the side and then slowly slid my body all the way down on the back seat so that I was no longer visible through the window. I tried to do so discreetly in the hopes that Papa wouldn't notice. No such luck. Papa asked immediately, "Say, Kim, why are you lying down?" "Oh," I said, thinking fast, "I have a headache, so I want to rest before I get to school." This answer seemed to pacify him, and he continued to drive. Once we arrived at the school, I waited until he pulled up right in front of the school gates. Before Papa could fully stop the car, I popped up, grabbed my backpack, and jumped out of the moving vehicle while mumbling a quick, "Bye, Papa." The school day progressed as normal, but as the day wound down and the hours moved toward the end of school, a feeling of dread started to tighten in the pit of my stomach. I was trying to adjust and adapt to my new school. Due to my revised fashion choices and new music catalog, I was starting to feel more comfortable and less like a protruding sore thumb. In just under an hour, my grandfather would arrive to pick me up in that white, smoky monstrosity in front of everybody. He was running the risk of completely counteracting all my efforts to fit in. The end of the school day arrived, and Papa, prompt as always, arrived to pick me up. I found a hideaway spot where I could spy him from afar and prepare myself to quickly run to the car and hop in when he pulled up to the front gate. The Plymouth was loud. Not only could I see the car when it entered the mouth of the driveway turnabout, but I could hear it idling and smell its exhaust. So could everyone else. As Papa inched closer to Marlboro's front gate, I strapped on my backpack. As soon as he pulled up to the spot where he would usually honk his horn, I executed my mad dash. I was desperate to do anything to avoid drawing further attention to the situation. As he inched up, I grabbed the back door handle, yanked the door open, jumped in, closed the door, and immediately leaned to the left so that the top half of my body was flush against the back seat. Papa looked at me lying down in the back seat and made a hump sound. He then turned his attention back to the other drivers and started slowly maneuvering us out of the parking turnabout. As we turned right onto the street, Papa asked, "You still have a headache?" Yes, Papa, I replied. He replied, "Humph," but he didn't say anything else. A few more minutes passed. As we turned onto Wilshire, he said, "I don't think you have a headache. I just think you don't want those people to see you in this car." Busted. I didn't say anything. He continued, "Let me tell you something. Don't you ever be ashamed of who you are. As long as you're clean and you're right, you have nothing to be ashamed of." As I lay on the back seat of the Plymouth, a feeling of complete shame came over me. Not only had I been foolish in my extreme level of concern about other people's judgment of me, but I had also hurt my dear Papa's feelings. I love my grandfather very much, and the last thing that I wanted to do was to hurt him. I didn't say I was sorry, but that is exactly what I felt. I simply replied, "Okay, Papa," and sat up in my seat. So we're going to, in the little time we have left, talk about pillars that apply to that excerpt. And I know there were two people who had some comments from the previous excerpt, so we'll start with them. Anissa, you said it was Eula, and who was the other person?
And Paulette.
And
Go
Paul.
ahead, Paulette. Go ahead, Paulette.
I'll give it very quickly from the last one because you made me remember when I went to test and interview for my job with the airlines. I figured I was pretty much trained from having worked at Disneyland, and I knew about the world now and its prejudices. And so I went in being very, very confident about this whole thing, dressed to kill and all of that. And before I got through with the exam, the administrator called my name, and I turned and I looked, and he motioned for me to come out in the hall. And I thought, well, what could he be doing? I haven't finished the test. He says, "Oh, you don't need to do that. I need you to," he wrote the address of where the class was starting downtown. And he says, "Do you know how to get downtown?" Well, I had never driven the freeway, but I lied and said yes. And so he told me what on-ramp to take to get down. And so in the moment that I crashed with him calling me out of the exam, I thought I had failed before I even got started. But he chose me before I even finished the test to go and join the class. That was what I wanted to share from the last one.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you.
What I was not so much wanted to share, but make a comment about was being truthful. And not just the children, but the parents have to be truthful also. They have to realize that they don't have these perfect kids, and and don't have to play to whatever untruths the kids are telling. So I just thought that that was interesting. We don't, as parents, we don't always tend to watch and listen, and we should, because sometimes our kids do things that are out of character, or what we think is out of character. And we need to acknowledge that. We need to acknowledge that that's not that kid I sent out there is not that sweet little kid everybody thinks he is. He might be sweet to us, but when he gets out there with his peers, he's somebody different. So that was all I wanted to say.
Well, I think that's a really good point. And it also highlights how the pillars, while I'm calling them the Black pillars, They're things that all, I think, young people could probably stand to be mindful of. And probably the young lady that I interacted with on my shadow day could have benefited from some of those pillars also. So thank you for that. Well, I know we're at 1 o'clock, so but I'll ask, are there any comments or thoughts about the most recent excerpt? I see Delina. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I tried to get to the mute.
Okay.
Anyway, something that you said in the excerpt, and I know I can't specifically remember, but it reminded me of when my kids, they lived in Senegal with in their teenage years, and when we came back, we moved to Maryland, and they went to an all-white school, and they came home laughing about these white kids that would sit they would be like a block away from school smoking in high school. This was a high school setting. And they overheard some of their conversations talking about, oh, I just hate my father. I just want to get a shotgun and kill him. And so they were like, so they called, my son had a name for them. He said they called them the ferocious kids because they thought they were so cool, you know, just smoking and talking about how they wanted to kill their parents. And it was just so foreign to them because we were such a close-knit family.
Absolutely. Very different dynamics. Absolutely. Oh, I think I see Paulette.
When you talked about your grandfather in the car and all, it made me remember, and I really regretted it later, and I apologized to my mom. I don't know what made me do it, but I think I was influenced by the way other mothers were dressed. And so she had me enrolled in ballet, dance, acrobat art. So it was all Saturday long to do she was a stage mom. But she dressed in suits, you know, with a blouse and the bow and the matching purse and shoes. And none of the other mothers looked like that. You know, she looked like she was going to an office, I guess. So I told her that I could get to the class on Saturday on the bus by myself, and she didn't have to take me. She was, you know, I kind of broke her heart because she liked to go, and she would sit there and do her needlework. She embroidered a lot.
Yeah.
And so she was working on a tablecloth. And when she told my dad that, and I overheard it, she expressed to him, she felt bad and she didn't know why. Was I embarrassed for her to be there, you know? And I didn't put it together either for a long time, that she just looked so different from the rest of the mothers. I didn't want her to take me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We all have those moments. Thank you for sharing. I think I see Susan Washington's hand.
Yes, Kimberly, I think it's just the times that you grew up in, like I grew up in the 60s. We were just, I was never embarrassed for my dad to take me to school in his old car. He was really strict, but he still took me to school. But I mean, that's just the difference. And what occurred when we were in school in the 60s and the 70s. It was just a different time.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. I don't know who was first, but I see the Schneiders and Miss Pabigo.
Pabigo. That's Kim. Kim, you were first. Go ahead, Kim.
Oh, I was just going to say, the whole fast to your village fit your excerpt you read. When a lot of us were in these elite spaces all day, you had to pay attention to what you said, how you reacted, what you did. It's just a relief to come home to your family, your neighborhood. Like I lived in South Central until I got married. It was nice to come home to our neighborhood. You didn't have to dress a certain way. You didn't have to act a certain way. It was your neighborhood. It was your family. And that's what empowered me when I had to go out there and be the only everything, that I could come home and be myself. And I treasure the people around me that didn't have all those hangups. So I think that was part of your excerpt, getting in your grandpa's big old car. That was
Right.
your family's car. And you probably, when you sat up, felt real comfortable in it.
Yeah, it was quite spacious. It was huge. Okay, the Schneiders, please.
Yeah, I would say like Susan, when we grew up, we weren't as conscious as you were about the car and everything else. I
Right.
was enjoying riding with my grandfather's truck. And we'd go around a corner and the door would open, and stuff like that. And everybody was hanging on to stay in the truck. And he would drive, and then he would come within like 50 feet of a end of a road, and the car was at the end. He'll start blowing his horn. Don't go yet. Don't go yet. But we didn't really care about that so much. It was all fun for us. But then when I got older, I've always been sort of a comic or to my family and to my friends. So my daughter only looked at me as one way. She didn't think I was very smart. So we had gotten to a group where she was in the orchestra, and we were the parents supporting the orchestra. And we had a meeting one day, and we're all in the auditorium, and they were asking people who had statements or questions. So I raised my hand, and she was telling my wife, don't let them say it. Don't let them say anything. She was afraid I was going to like show that, her family was dumb. So I reverted, like you said, change your voice and everything else, and then usually code switch. Yeah, code switch is where now. Yeah, she realized that I wasn't as dumb as she thought I was. So that was just the reverse of the situation there. Yeah.
That's so funny. I actually have an experience in the book, which I can't read today, but with my father, where yes, similar, very similar to that. Okay, I see Miss McLeod.
Mary J. Blige enjoys being called many names.
Go ahead.
Just real quick, and it's somewhat related, but more related to the whole session that we're having. And I remember being in situations at work where I was the only one often, and because I'm not always obviously Black, I'll put it that way, I would often get comments or hear comments, and I would remind people that, I am a Black woman, and so I look at the world differently than you. And, and I had a boss one time tell me, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot you were Black, and so that was interesting. I also had an interesting experience one time when I worked, one of my first jobs out of college was working for a bank, and a white customer came into the bank, and I was working in the branch. We had to learn every job in the branch system, and so I was working in statements. And she came in and she said, "Oh, I'm so glad that you're here and you can help me. I want to have all my statements held here at the bank because." And then she looked at me. She said, "There aren't any here, are there?" And I said, "Excuse me." She said, "Well, somebody's been stealing my statements out of my mailbox, and I just wanted to make sure there aren't any Black people around that can hear me."
Wow.
And I just looked at her. I said, "Well, you'd be surprised."
Wow.
And so you get those kind of comments too. But the other thing that I wanted to say is I know that many times being the only one can be very wearing. Years and years of being the only one can wear on you. And when I would try to talk to people about aiming for the stars and stuff like that, I said, you really have to be honest with yourself and also decide whether or not, that you're willing to be the one and only all the time, because it is very, it's tough. It's when you're the only one my husband and I would go to these, big soiree Christmas parties all the time at the chairman's house or whatever. And you're one of, a handful of Black people out of everybody in the room. Or I even had I went to a wedding of a guy who worked for me, and we it was at the country club in Palos Verdes, and I think it's the Trump Club now. But we were sat at a table with his nephew, and his nephew was sitting with his sister, and there was my husband and I and another Black couple, a girl who also happened to work in my office, and her husband. So there were four of us who were Black at the table, and the other 6 were white people, 2 of which were related to the groom. And this young guy, because he must have been in his mid-20s, I would say, started to talk about the fact that he hated Black people, and that when he drove down the freeway, he just wished he could shoot them. You know, and I'm thinking, and he already explained that he was this guy's nephew that worked for me, right? This guy worked for me. So I just looked at my husband and I said, it's time for us to go. So we got up and we left. And I waited for his uncle to come to me after he came back into the office from his honeymoon and apologize or something. And he didn't. And so I called him in and I said, I don't know if you heard what happened at the table when we were sitting at the wedding. And he said, yeah, I heard. He's crazy. And that was it. And I said, well, I said it was extremely unfortunate that he shared that.
Yeah.
And it's, why my husband and I left early. And I had expected you to at least come to me and say something, about it. But it's very interesting to be in those kind of positions, and what, I don't know. I think that we're presented with situations and circumstances that very, very few others are having to deal with on a constant basis. And it's very tiring and it's very trying sometimes. And now I know that, we're at a peak at some of that too. And so I don't know. I just thought I'd share that because it has to do with these spaces and elite spaces and how do you manage them?
Yes. Well, thank you for sharing. And I see Susan's chat about thank you for the conversation. And I know we're over time. I know I feel like I could continue to go on, and I do have other excerpts, but I want to respect everyone's time. And I want to thank you because thank you, Delina. She's ordered the book. I want to just say, I have learned from you all also, and I'm so grateful for you sharing your insights and your experiences. And I just feel so fortunate to have had this opportunity. And I will say there's a passage in the book that speaks to what Denise was just sharing with regard to being in experiences like that, and what do you do when you need to confront somebody, because sometimes you do have to say something. And so there's an experience where I had with the teacher where I had to stand up and say something. So at any rate, there are lots of interesting experiences in the book, and I'm so appreciative of all of you for your time. And thank you for your wonderful comments you're putting in the chat. It's been an honor and a privilege. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Kathleen.
Yes, thank you, Kimberly. Thank you for your amazing presentation. I'm really thankful that we have these opportunities to discuss this on a platform with everyone. And I would like to end the meeting. I would like to invite you back, honestly, and have you again. Other than that, we will end the meeting now. And thank you, everyone, for coming out. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Miss Kimberly.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.